Welcome to the Impact Over Optics podcast, a place where real progress shines beyond appearances and distractions. Here, voices from across industries come together to share wisdom, stories, and strategies that remind us what's possible when purpose leads the way. Because true progress is not measured by how it looks, but by the impact it leaves behind. Let's get started.
Welcome to Impact Over Optics, the podcast where we go beyond appearances and focus on what really matters: authentic leadership, purposeful results, and lasting impact. I'm your host, Jim Viscusi, and today I'm joined by Tim Frazier. Tim has spent his entire life thinking about data, how to structure it, how to store it, how to keep it safe, and how to help others learn its secrets. He's been married to the love of his life for the last 33 years, has 3 sons, including twins, all of which remain an active part of his life. He spends his free time visiting friends, reading, collecting rocks from strange and exotic places, and trying to better understand the mind of his cat, Megajewel. His goals are to become better at the practice of Zen meditation and to help other beings see and overcome the sources of suffering in themselves and other beings. Tim, welcome to the show.
So glad to be here with you, Jim.
That's awesome. Thank you. Our topic this month is friendships that heal, and I'm hoping to explore that with you in the context of the workplace. As a disclaimer, Tim and I are friends in a friendship that started through work, so I'm really looking forward to talking with you and just sort of exploring this. Thanks for really giving us the time today. So I want to start out with a question, really just to dig into the thing. When you think about friendships in your own life, especially in the context of work relationships, what comes to mind first for you?
Let's see. I tend to not think about friendships as being friendships and work friendships. At least, where I have arrived at my life, my experience, it's a friend is a friend.
Mhm.
And when I think about friends, I think about it as a person that I can depend on to be a good listener. When I need someone to listen to me, that I can return that favor when they need it. And I know that I have a good friend or a close friend when 2 years can go by, and when we talk again, it feels like no time has gone by whatsoever. And I used to think I couldn't get to that place with many people, but I find as I get older, it gets easier.
That's actually fantastic. I do want to dig into that in a minute. But I want to come back to the workplace because you said something really meaningful in that sense of, for you, a friend is not a work friend or a personal friend. A friend is a friend with whom you have that, you really elegantly describe that deep connection that you have. But what I'd like to sort of dig into, since this is more of a workplace focus, is tell me when you were in the workplace and a friendship like that felt essential, not optional. Tell me what was happening at that time, if you can remember something at that moment.
Yeah, I think we've all had times in our working life where nothing seems to be defined anymore, either because the organization is changing around us, the work that we're doing is completely new to us, and maybe it's not a problem that we know how to solve. And so I've gravitated into friendships under those circumstances where I really needed help doing the work, like just getting my job done. And I felt really not very much at ease because I'm not the kind of guy that likes not knowing. But then the friends that I found, or the people that I connected with, that I ultimately, I would say, became friends with, turns out they were feeling the same way. That when I just said, look, I really haven't got a clue, what I'm going to do here, what I'm going to do with this. What do you think? And you sort of have that really interesting pause in the conversation that turns into a giggle, that turns into like just a full-on roaring laugh when everybody sort of realizes, yeah, my pot's boiling over too.
Yeah.
And that's what I would say has really brought me together, brought me together with you.
Yeah.
Certainly. We were both like, what are we going to do here? Like, which way is up? Which way is north? Whatever corny metaphor you want to stick in here. But then, when we both sort of said, well, not really sure, but you know what, we're going to figure it out together. That to me was a great moment in the workplace. And then, 5 years go by, 10 years go by, and you realize I'm still with that guy.
Yep.
Or I'm still with that friend. I didn't really think about it, especially, for you and me, but I can trace it back to the moment. Yeah,
So
like the time when we first met and the first things we might have worked on together. I remember what I was wearing.
I really want to dig into that because it's
Yeah.
what you said, you know, that moment where we each sort of started to talk to each other about that. For context for everybody who's listening or watching today, I was brand new in the role where I met Tim, and I had just come out of a really bad work situation where a project I was working on that I was very emotionally and personally invested in.
Bob's a rebound friend. Is that
But look, it lasted. What can I tell you? It's amazing. And I was terribly uncertain. Not a place where I normally feel, but I had come into this role. I just felt like I had been lifeboated out when the Titanic was going down. I just started to work with you, and you were the one to open up. So, was there anything in that moment that you remember that was difficult for you, or that you had to make a decision to reach out to me and open up in that particular way? Because I know I was not certain enough to do it. I don't know that I would have had you not had that initial courage.
I would say, my experience made it very easy for me
Mm,
because I've worked a couple of places where you were rewarded for saying I don't know. Okay. I mean, you weren't rewarded for not being able to do the work. Okay. Like you had to do the job, but it was much more valued that you would admit not knowing than pretending to know and sort of creating a facade.
mhm.
So, for me, like saying, I haven't got a clue here, Jim, what are we going to do? That wasn't too hard.
Yeah.
But I would say it took a leap of faith. In other words, I had to say, well, I'm going to say it to this guy, and he's he's going to do what he's going to do.
Exactly.
Um, in your case, in our case, we got a great working relationship. We've done solid things together that meant something to the place that we work,
Mhm.
and it meant something to us personally.
Yeah.
I guess my advice on this, if I had to give advice, is put yourself out there, be open, be honest, and if the other person shows you they're not, they're going to betray that trust, you don't have to trust them again.
Yeah.
But I think everybody deserves trust, deserves the assumption of trust to begin with.
So let's pull into that for a second, Tim, because obviously you're and I, the relationship that we formed has gone on, as you mentioned, for many years. We built a couple of products together. In that first project we were on, and then another project we did together, and we've maintained, a close personal relationship in and out of work. In the other environment where you worked, where there was a consensus or a sort of an office, a meme or way of doing things, was there ever a cost to that kind of vulnerability to say, I don't know? Did anybody ever sort of like give you negative feedback in that particular regard? If so, how did you handle that?
That's an interesting question. I would have to say no. I've never gotten negative blowback. Now, either I was lucky or I was just
Mm,
too bullheaded to understand people were giving me negative feedback. I mean, you never know for sure, right? I
mhm.
mean, I think the best advice I got in this regard, I probably got from my fifth grade teacher, whose name was Mr. Fun.
Okay, perfect.
Seriously, Mr. Fun. And he said, look, uh, people can't insult you. People can say whatever they want to say to you. It's up to you to decide whether or not you take it as an insult. And keep in mind, he's saying this to a class of, how old are you in fifth grade? 12.
10, 12, maybe.
And
Yeah.
you can be insulted when when you're that age. I don't like your shoes. It's a big thing. But the truth of his statement has stayed with me. You know what I'm
Mm,
saying?
mm,
It's not like, I don't mean to say it's steeling yourself against bad remarks or vitriol thrown at you by others. I mean, if somebody's doing that to you, you owe it to yourself to, if you can, remove yourself
yeah.
from the
To
situation.
protect yourself.
I'm
Sure.
saying, um, both, everybody brings something to a situation, okay?
Hmm.
And people possibly saying or criticizing you doesn't diminish what you brought, okay?
Okay.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah. So let's flip into that a little further, right? So you and I met, and You were leading a small team. I was sort of like staff to the VP in that particular organization. We've each gone on at one point to take on larger teams. But did you ever feel that vulnerability, even though you never perceived it as personal, but did you ever feel that vulnerability put you in a situation where people respected you less as a leader, that it cost you some level of authority?
Yeah, it's a reasonable question. And what I would almost say is that's a question for them. Okay. I have found that a better solution for me is to acknowledge vulnerability, acknowledge how you might be feeling about a situation to the people that look to you for leadership. The reason being, if the team as a collective, let's say, is in a situation where everyone is feeling sad, or pressed, stressed. Um, if you don't acknowledge that, they just look at you like you're a clueless, disconnected machine. So you can't say, "Oh my gosh, I'm stressed. I don't know what to do." That in a leader is not reinforcing good feelings, but to
Team
say,
dynamic, yeah.
"Guys, this is a stressful situation. You're stressed. I'm stressed." But every time we've been in a situation like this, we've figured our way out of it. Okay, and I have every confidence that we're going to do the same thing again. So even though I feel stressed now, you know what? That's a call to action, a call to arms, whatever. We're going to prevail. But I think for me, I've found it's okay to acknowledge the emotive, the feeling side of it. I don't know. Like I haven't had anybody say, "My God, the guy's weak. I can't work for him anymore. I'm out of here." Okay, that's
Right.
never happened.
Yeah.
But there's a line. I mean, as a leader, your job is to instill confidence and direction and reduce ambiguity and help people think through chaos. But I think it's okay to say this is a tight spot.
Yeah.
We're going to get out of this together.
I think that human acknowledgement is so huge, Tim, to know that your leader acknowledges all of those same human feelings. It almost goes back to what you said when you were talking about how you and I met, that somebody goes first and acknowledges the situation is weird or stressful or strange or I don't know. And then everybody responds to that in a super positive fashion. I think that's a great takeaway. But let me try to flip that on its head for a minute. Let me ask it as a direct question. Did someone ever take advantage of your leadership style, that openness, that friendship, vulnerability, either personally in the workplace or as a leader, whatever example might show up in your brain?
I certainly have been stabbed in the back, in storied my storied time in the workplace. And I won't say that it's because I opened up about how I felt. I think it happened more because I didn't think about how I said something. Okay. That my communication was off. Okay. And what that taught me, I know we're talking about relationships and friendships here, but particularly in the workplace, there is a decorum or a set of rules that the culture of the organization that you work for adheres to. Okay, and I would say to first order now, I sort of sense that that's become normalized across corporate America. I mean, there are things we just don't talk about or say in the workplace because they're not appropriate for that setting. But as a leader, people hang on your every word sometimes, and so you really have to be aware of that. And when I've gotten into sticky situations, it's because I forgot. It's because maybe I've erred and thought I was more friendly than I should have been. I was more colloquial. Okay,
Right.
and we're all advised, because we all take training and whatnot about certain things but the truth is you don't know what other people are going to hear when you say something. Okay, so it doesn't mean you shouldn't be authentic, but I think as a leader you have to be mindful.
So is there anything that came out of that practically for you? Did that change? Because we've had that experience.
Yeah.
You talked about being stabbed in the back. You talked about people responding in a way that you didn't mean because you were maybe looser than they expected.
Yes.
Did that give you a wall, a boundary, a rule, a less immediately open way to look into those friendships? What about that was your learning experience?
Well, for the bad ones, I didn't want to say anything to anybody for a
Mm-hmm.
while. Okay.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work. You can't, right, because ultimately we get our jobs done by using our words and talking to each other. So you learn a lesson of being mindful of what you say. Not necessarily talking less, but talking more purposefully, more aware of the receiver of the message. And it's a hard lesson to learn. And I would say I haven't learned it for the last time because you do lose that boundary between yourself as a leader and as a human that is in the groove or in the zone or in the flow in a conversation. And it's very exciting when that happens.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And you can sort of lose yourself in that, but sometimes you can't kind of lose yourself. And that's, that's, I think everyone that gets into leadership or management or whatever term you want to use, that is a skill we have to learn. Some people say, cut it off completely, be a machine. I find that too difficult for me. I would much rather try to relate to people because simple things. If you know someone has a sick spouse or a sick kid, you're not going to not ask them about that. Okay, unless you're a machine. Okay,
Uh-huh.
and that's and they appreciate mostly being asked.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And you don't have to dwell on it, but you know what I'm saying? It's that's part of being a person, acknowledging I've had a sick spouse or I've had a sick kid and
Uh-huh.
I know what you're going through. I have sympathy and empathy. And if you cut all that off, then you're sort of missing a slice of life, I think, somehow.
Yeah, I would agree. So it's funny you talk about that personal relation and relating to someone as a human and being, we mentioned Zen in your intro. I don't know that we'll dig into that, but that idea that everybody suffers. I suffer, you
Yeah.
suffer, right? But we talked about friendship, and for you, you made a very clear statement that friendship is something you do as a human, whether you're in a work context or a personal context or whatever context you find yourself in. But did you find, especially in those times when you were having a negative relationship in the work context, that it affected your other relationships, your other friendships? Or were you able to parse that, separate that along the
Yeah, I would say it'd be hard to not have it spill over.
way? Uh-huh.
You know, if you so the way I was able to get through things like that is I have a family, a spouse that I've been with for a long time, and friends outside of work that have been a counterbalance to that.
Uh-huh.
So, to those of you that may be listening, it's good to have friends you don't work with. That for when the times at work are hard. Okay. It's good to have people that can say, I can see how that situation at work might be tough for you, and then talk to you without that context.
Uh-huh.
You might even use the word baggage.
Yeah, maybe.
But that, when it got really tough, that's how I dealt with it. Or that's what helped me get through. Having friends that were completely disconnected from.
Out of that context and into a different context that
Yeah.
you could share with. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me try to close this out with one question, Tim. Is there anything that you still find difficult about friendships? Is there any sort of thing that you would look at yourself and say, I struggle with this or I want to be better with this? Just any thought that you would have in that
Yeah.
space.
This is a weird thought maybe, but I often feel like I don't give enough back. As corny as that sounds, like I've leaned on people incredibly in my life for things. And I don't feel like I've adequately reciprocated in all
Mm.
cases. So that, one of the things I'm working on right now is that idea. Not necessarily like paying back that person, but making my own deposits in the karma bucket somehow, or so that I can be that person for somebody in need. Okay. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
It certainly does. And I would tell you that as your friend, I certainly have leaned on you many, many times, and you have always been a very gracious, thoughtful, considerate, compassionate human when those times occurred. And I am grateful of your
Let
friendship.
me say to you, I've never felt leaned on. Okay, which means it not a thing.
Delightful.
Okay.
Tim, that's, I think, the best place we could possibly finish up this little chat. I want to thank you for joining us today on the Impact Over Optics podcast, for being open and vulnerable and sharing your experience. It's been an amazing conversation. I really appreciate your time today. So I'm Jim Viscusi, and remember, authentic change always outlasts appearance. Until next time, lead with purpose and leave a real mark. Thank you.
Thanks again for joining us on the Impact Over Optics podcast. We hope today's insights sparked fresh ideas and reminded you of the power of purpose-driven work. Please share this episode with others who believe in real change, and join us again as we continue to look beyond appearances and focus on the impact that truly lasts.